Welcome to Area DMG and Radio DMG and DMGIce.com. We're presenting a little bit about the Nintendo 3DS and backwards compatibility and Virtual Console. We love Virtual Console. I like the idea of sometimes you can get harder to find games because the problem with Game Boy games is that sometimes they become a little bit rare, and then you have people who scalp the prices on it. Ask anybody who's seen Shantae for the Game Boy Color on eBay for about $200 can tell you that yes, there are people who scalp Game Boy Color games and Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance games. Virtual Console is a way of evening that field and allowing you to have legitimately a digital copy of games that you may have owned or didn't own or missed out on in the past. Now we're going to talk a little bit about why Virtual Console is in... Well, we're going to talk about the status of Virtual Console as of today. Today is December 21st, 2011. We're actually, by the time we're done with this, it'll probably be December 22nd. But yes, we're going to talk about the 3DS, which actually I'm pretty happy with the 3DS so far. The unit plays Game Boy games. DS games. See, like we've got one in there. This one's actually... Yeah. Anyways, where it plays these types of games and DSi only games and 3DS games. Now, 3DS games won't work on your DSi XL or your DS Lite or your original DS. They only work on the 3DS and future iterations of the 3DS. Now, they can be noted by a particular notch, and they're gray. 3DS games are gray, making them actually similar to the original Game Boy. They're not as dark of a gray, but they're gray. Nintendo DSi games, DSi only games, mostly use the camera and the extra processing power. The DSi has slightly more processing power and better than the original DS or the DS Lite because it is an evolution of the DS line of products, and the 3DS, of course, is much more powerful. But DSi only games, none of them really use the extra capabilities aside from the camera. Now, there's DSi games that use the camera strictly for their play, and those are white. And then there's a couple games which use the DSi features, like Solitaire Robo. It's black, which is what most DS games are colored, and it uses the DSi features, but it's backwards compatible with original DS Lite, etc., etc. It's compatible with those, but it has features that can only be used on the DSi and the 3DS. And then you have the DSi only games, which can only be used on the DSi and the 3DS. And then you have DS games, which can be used on all of them. And 3DS games, which can only be used on 3DS. Now, one thing I like about it is that the 3DS emulates the DS. You can use your DS games with it. A lot of the features work. Games which require an additional accessory will not work on it. But like you can hold down the select button when you start them up in the home menu on the 3DS to play things at their original resolution. That also works on Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and some of the future items that they'll be putting on there. You can also change the brightness when you're in game on the 3DS playing a DS game or a DSiWare or Game Boy Advance Virtual Console by hitting the home button. So the bottom message pops up about exiting the game or not exiting it, holding the start button, and then hitting up or down on the D-pad to turn up or down the brightness of the game. We'll demonstrate that in a future video or something. But yes, these are they're the different levels of compatibility. There's also some that have an IR port built into them, like Pokemon White, Pokemon Soul Silver, etc., etc. And these are actually, if I held them up to light, I don't have a really good camera for video, so so I can't really show it to you. One of these days we'll have to get an actual better video camera. But yeah, they're actually red. They're a dark red when you hold them up to light. that you can see kind of through them and they glow red. They're different from, of course, the normal DS games or from DSi only games or 3DS games. But let's get back to Virtual Console. The Nintendo Virtual Console has been covering, or Virtual Pocket as it was originally supposed to be called, covers the Nintendo Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and for ambassadors only at this time, the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. There was supposed to be some Game Gear games on it, but as of right now, Sega hasn't announced a realistic date on when we're going to get our first taste of Game Gear or TurboGrafx 16 games. So, let's talk about the Game Boy Virtual Console. We have 24 games on Game Boy Virtual Console at this present time, and they include games like Mega Man, Balloon Kid, Super Mario Land, Gargoyle's Quest, Radar Mission, etc. And then we have 2 Game Boy Color games on there. That would be Blaster Master Enemy Below and The Legend of Zelda DX. I'm talking about here in the United States of America, all 50 states, or 58 if you're an idiot. But yeah, all 50 states and territories, etc. But yeah, we're talking about the US Virtual Console. There's still a lot of games that can be put onto it. One thing I like about the selection so far, we've had some support from games that are like Tecmo, because we had like Fortified, let's see, we have Kirby's Dream Land, we had a couple things like Donkey Kong 94 showed up, that was a good one, Alleyway. But yeah, we've had support from Capcom, which means in the future we'll get stuff like Bionic Commando and maybe some Game Boy Color games that are published by Capcom that are in high demand. Maybe. But yeah, this actually came out on Virtual Console in Japan, so it's only really kind of a matter of time before we get it over here, because there's no real difference aside from like locating the actual stuff. Hey, if anybody needs help with getting an original thing for Virtual Console or whatnot, I've got a lot of games, people. Anyways, one thing I like, and it's actually given me a bit of hope, recently the inclusion of Blaster Master Enemy Below has been excellent because, one, it's a Game Boy Color game from Sunsoft. Nintendo published it on the Virtual Console, and they worked with Sunsoft to get it on there. And that's excellent because Sunsoft is the rights holder here in the United States for these titles: Final Fantasy Adventure, Sunsoft; Final Fantasy Legend, Sunsoft; Legend 2, Sunsoft; and Legend 3, Sunsoft. Square originally put them out, and I think Square Enix still retains some rights in Japan on them, but outside of Japan, Sunsoft may still have the rights to them. And if Sunsoft has the rights to them, and we're able to get Sunsoft games already, it's only a matter of time and paperwork and paying the right people. Now, I don't expect everything that was on the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy to make it to Virtual Console. That's kind of sad, but that's just the way it is. Not everything can make it because sometimes the rights are lost, or there's just horrible things that happen with that. Sometimes, like a company, like for example, there's a version of Pac-Man on there right now that's for the original Game Boy. Now, then there's the Game Boy Color Pac-Man that came out, but we didn't get that one. Oddly enough, we got the original one instead of the special edition. Not sure why, but maybe we'll get this one in the future. It also includes Pack Attack. But yes, here are some of the games that were put out on Game Boy Advance Virtual Console, and those are Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3, Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, F-Zero, Maximum Velocity, WarioWare Incorporated, Mega Micro Games, Metroid Fusion, Mario Kart Super Circuit, Fire Emblem, The Sacred Stones, Wario Land 4. And then we're going to go into stuff that might not ever make it to Virtual Console. That would be older versions of games that have Game Boy Color games on the Virtual Console, and foreign versions of them, unlicensed games, and games that have versions on them already, like say Super Mario Brothers, Xevious, or have releases of them, like for example Mega Man 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are on Mega Man 0 Collection. But yes, that's where we are on the Virtual Console. We'll see where they go in the future. I'd like to see a much higher stack in the future.